Okay, we have time for a couple more. Here's a good one from Bahuz Dara, who is also always in our audience. Just got her BA at Ryerson. Prime Minister, with the current hyper-partisanship in the House of Commons among staffers and between the federal and provincial governments, can you note any moments of strong cross-partisanship, of coming together while you've been in government? And if so, what credit can you give to which opposing party?
I think, well, the fact that this minority government has still functioned for almost 2 years means that we have been able to have cross-party collaboration on a number of things. I think there really was a sense, particularly in the beginning of the pandemic, of either it was a positive, everyone wanting to come together, or a slightly more negative, but just as real, parties realizing nobody wanted to be responsible for playing political games in a pandemic, because Canadians wouldn't have any patience for it. There was a coming together in around some really, really big things. Now, the Conservatives are certainly continuing to criticize us that we spent too much too quickly and got too much out the door, but they were there to support us while we were doing it. And I think the numbers bear out that it was the right thing to do, and they would have been wrong had they been in power and not done that. But that's a question that I'm sure will come up time and time again in the coming months, perhaps. But the ability.
Any specific credit to her question? Who gets a shout out from you?
The NDP helped us pass the budget because they recognized how important it was to get help out to people. Now the NDP will always feel that we needed to do more and we needed to fill more gaps and spend twice as much as we actually did, when we still spent a hell of a lot. But they get credit for that. Right now, on a bill that is particularly sensitive around making sure that the web giants actually find ways of supporting Canadian artists and creators, to make sure that you can find Canadian content on Netflix, to make sure that we know how much these companies are making off of Canadians, so they can pour that back into Canadian content. The Bloc is actually there to support us, because the Bloc and the Liberals are always the strongest on culture and supporting artists and musicians. The NDP is not there for artists now, and the Conservatives just attacked that, and they're playing empty free speech games which don't apply. But so we've been able to work with the Bloc on that. And on other things, we've been able to work with the Conservatives on some slightly more procedural things. But there are ways. Everyone worked together to put recognition of Indigenous peoples in the citizenship oath. That just passed last week. So there are things that people are able to come together on.
So minority government brings its own discipline. Does this mean you've reconciled yourself to making minority government work for a full mandate?
It's not entirely up to me. And one of the things that we have seen is that there is right now a whole lot of filibustering going on conversion therapy, for example. I think everyone can agree that conversion therapy is a horrific process of trying to, forcibly cure the gay out of someone. And it's something that, unfortunately, there are a lot of right-wing politicians that still defend, and the Conservatives don't want that to happen, don't want to come forward to a vote, because they don't want to actually be accounted for the fact that they still support, many of them, conversion therapy. So there is a logjam in Parliament where we can't get anything done because they're busy blocking this one thing that they don't want to be accountable on. So there are always going to be procedural issues. We're just trying to power through and pass enough of those to get the big things done. But it's always a tension. The other thing, though, Martin, is that building back better means very different things for different parties. And when we talk about systemic change, we talk about recognizing systemic discrimination, we talk about building for the environment, we talk about innovation, we talk about things that are maybe not top of the list for Conservatives. At one point, as we build back better, the government's going to need to have a clear mandate to do that. And I know that's what eventually an election will carry on, how we build back and learn the lessons of the pandemic to build better. And the very different visions that the parties have are eventually going to collide in this minority parliament.
Well, I gave you a free opening to announce your future campaign strategy. Let me just claw back a second or minute of time to ask you a question that I asked of the Green Party leader, Annamie Paul, and also NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, when they were here. How do you all get along personally. I mean, never mind your political differences. She said she had you reached out, had a nice chat about her to congratulate her on her leadership victory. How does it work between you and Mr. Singh and Ms. Paul and Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Blanchet?
The same way I try to make it work between me and any member of parliament. Every single person in that house represents a group of Canadians who chose to send them to be their voice. And therefore, however much we disagree on some things, I've got to know that they got sent there by a bunch of Canadians who felt that they were the right person to speak for them, and therefore I need to listen to them. I need to show them respect. I need to be very clear on where I disagree with them, but I also need to understand where they're coming from, because they are representing perspectives and concerns that Canadians have. I will say that there are issues that I get along very, very well with Annemie and Jagmeet on, and even Mr. Blanchet, because there are things where we align on. It's harder for me to find things to align on with Mr. O'Toole. Perhaps because Mr. O'Toole doesn't always know where he aligns on things, but that's another issue. But Canadians expect us to come together and, yes, to debate hard. I mean, people say, the partisanship in the House is a terrible thing. Actually, it's the way democracy is designed. If anything I do as a government, I know that people have a job to try and poke holes in it and say the worst possible things about it. Well, I'm going to be damn sure that I'm going to make it right, because if they end up convincing people that I did it wrong, that goes very poorly for me. So that adversarial nature of Parliament is a good thing. We just all have to remember, though, we're serving the same citizens. We're serving the same country. And when we get down to questions of values, usually it's easier to find ways to get along. It's when you get into tactics and strategy that things sometimes go cross purposes.
We are out of time. There is one more question that I always ask, and I always save it for the end so we can go into sneak in overtime. And it is a question which you don't have to answer, about getting young people engaged in democracy. You got a big bump in the youth vote in 2015. Tell us what worked for you, what works for all parties. How do you get young people to vote? How do you get them to find the time to get involved? And tell us what doesn't work, if you have time.
What doesn't work is trying to make voting cool. You always see these ad campaigns with celebrities saying, come on, vote, it's cool. They say it much better than I just did. But this idea that voting should be cool is something that people have tried to do and failed at so many times for a very simple reason. Voting isn't cool. When you think what cool is detached. No, it's okay, I'm cool. No, don't worry about me, I'm cool. I don't need help, Cool is detached, whereas voting is a deeply earnest, engaged, step forward to say, I'm going to put a little X in this box and I'm going to try and make a difference with that. And I'm believing deep in my heart that doing this earnest thing in this community center or this church basement is going to make a difference in the world that's a big leap. And that's what you need to harness into if you want young people to get involved, that voting matters, that getting involved in politics is what shapes the world around you. We wouldn't have been able to move Stephen Harper out of being prime minister if it hadn't been for millions of young people stepping up to say, yeah, you know what? I want the country to go in a different, better direction. I want us to do more on the environment, and we have. I want us to take real steps towards reconciliation, and we have. I want us to be fairer and better and more equal in the way we do things, and we have. Now, is it perfect? No, there's always going to be people out there who will say, no, you should do more, you need to do more, and it's great that they're doing that because it pushes us along. But ultimately, you need to make sure you are pushing your government and your country in the right way. And the best way to do that is to get involved, is to put up your hand. Young people get a bad rap for being apathetic and disconnected. And yes, sometimes young people can be very cynical about things and frustrated and disconnected. But when you actually scratch the surface and engage with young people a bit, you realize that if they're angry and if they're frustrated and if they're tuning out, it's not because they don't care about the world. It's because they care so deeply and are therefore so frustrated that people aren't listening to them or thinking about them or responding to their concerns that they tune out. And what we need to do as political parties is, instead of allowing them to tune out, instead of saying, here, come and stuff envelopes for me in a back room, instead, get them involved to create the political movement you're part of, get them involved to go out and get more young people involved, get them to believe in what you're doing. And that's where, I'll be honest, a progressive liberal party like ours has a hard time going against the progressive idealist parties that can say, no, we should just change capitalism. Yes, everyone will sign up for that. We make it more fair. Yes, we should stop having an army. Yes, we should just shut down the oil sands tomorrow. Those are the kinds of things people are like, yes, that makes a lot of sense. Or yes, we should just fix reconciliation in a weekend. It's easy to say those things. Much harder to actually put in the effort of doing them, of pushing for it, of making it happen. And that's what we've been focused on. And, for a lot of people, not just young people, everyone wants the quick fix. Like, what have you done for me lately? What's going to be better for me to vote for? What's going to change the world in the most radical way in the next election? That's one way of looking at things. The way I hope a lot of people look at things is, how can I actually get involved to make that meaningful change that's not going to be changed back as soon as there is another election and the pendulum swings back from Obama to Trump to Biden and starts, and you end up getting completely disjointed as a society. Instead, how do you pull people together, make meaningful, solid movements forward? That's the challenge and the trick of politics, particularly in a country as diverse as ours, which doesn't just mean backgrounds, it means perspectives and ideology and priorities and sometimes values. How you bring people together, that's much harder. And the more you can get young people engaged in that discussion around competing priorities and making those hard decisions, not the easy decisions, the more you get away from politics is cool and trendy, and here I am on Instagram on my bicycle, and instead get into, here's the tough, hard work that we're doing to actually bend the curve towards justice.
And I could only add to that, come and see us in person on campus to continue that conversation face à face and deliver the message. That's all the time we have. I want to thank you, Prime Minister, for coming to our Democracy Forum for the first time as PM. It has been a difficult week for all of us, but I think talking to each other and listening to each other is how democracy and decisions get done. So come back and see us. I also want to thank everyone in the audience who listened in and asked questions. There were a lot. We did our best. Finally, thanks especially to the Faculty of Arts, to the Dean, Dr. Pam Sugiman, for their support.